Welcome back to an episode of Clutch Gene Sports. I'm with my guy Josh Harper, who was at the Super Bowl, got to see everything in person. Unfortunately, the Niners came up short. Last time we were together, we got to do a preview. I have not talked to him since the Niners lost the Super Bowl, so we're gonna definitely go over it. But how are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Can't complain over here. Healthy. All good, man. How you doing?
Yes, doing good, man. That's the most important, right? Like as long as we're good, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah. That's all that
so,
matters, man. That's all that matters.
so you were at the Super Bowl. You got to watch
Mhm.
the Niners 4 quarters playing really good football. And then they crumbled. Obviously in the second half, it was more disappointing than anything. What were your initial thoughts from that Super Bowl loss against the Chiefs?
Man, I just think it was a situation where the Niners got outcoached offensively, defensively. They just got outcoached. Spagnolia, he made some adjustments. Purdy started out hot, 8 for 9. The offense, not just Purdy, so the offense started out hot. 8 for 9. McCaffrey is running well. Spags made some changes. He made some adjustments, and that's where games are won and lost because they're both there for a reason. They both have talent on offense and defense. But at the end of the day, I know players do have to play, right? Players do have to play, but that's why coaches stay in there all day, all night, because that matters as well, and the X's and the O's. So I really think that the coaching staff just got outcoached. But that's plain and simple, outcoached.
So first half of the game, Niners offense is moving, man, right? Like,
Mhm.
so I finally went back and watched the all 22 of it. Niners were offensively, they were dominating. Like they were moving the ball, just weren't putting up points in that first quarter, which hurt them drastically. Second half comes, Spagnola goes away from his zone and goes pretty much man the rest of the game, like across the board, cover 0, cover 1,
Mhm.
um, and he's matching up. Now, Kyle's issue was calling man beaters for Deebo Samuel. What are your thoughts on the man beaters for Deebo Samuel and continuing to run the ball up the middle when Spagnola's essentially has a six? He has a bare front. It's actually six on the line with the linebacker at all times on that line of scrimmage, blitzing. What are your thoughts on how Kyle coached this game, and do you blame Kyle Shanahan for this loss?
I mean, when you talk about it like that, drawing up man beaters for Deebo Samuel, I know he's a receiver in the NFL, but that's not the reason why they paid him. They didn't pay him because he was beating man coverage on the backside 1-on-1. Just go out and get us a first down. No, he got paid because he was getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage. He was getting the ball in his hands. He's a jack of all trades, but what is he best at with the ball in his hands? Finding the zone, beating the zone, finding the open hole in the zones and things like that. Deebo was never a player where he's just going out, beating man coverage. And that's not a knock towards him. That's just not really his game. I mean, he can do it every once in a while. Or he can do it, but that's not his strong suit. So do I blame Kyle? I blame Kyle for not putting his players in the right position to be successful. You have a man beater in Brandon Aiyuk, and to an extent Juan Jennings. So I don't know, and even Christian McCaffrey out the backfield is unguardable, right? You have those three guys who can go out there and beat man coverage and make Spags get out of man coverage and go back in the zone. But like you said, there was a lot of times where Deebo was, the primary target in those man-to-man coverages, and that's not what he really does. Not a knock on him, but that's just we like to get the ball in his hands and let him play football.
So it's interesting because I know a lot of people were like, well, it's not Kyle's fault or stuff like that. I'm like, no, it's 100% Kyle's fault. Like it's okay to admit your coach got out coached. Like those
Mhm.
are two of the best coaches in the NFL. Uh, now you've played at the highest level, so I'm going to ask you this question, which is I'm honestly very curious. I don't know the answer to this. That's why I want to ask you this one. So when your coach is calling man beaters and the primary target is someone who isn't creating separation, getting open, is it okay for the quarterback to go off of off of the first read right away, knowing that guy is likely not going to get open or he's not creating separation today, and go to your number two, which would have been George Kittle, Brandon Aiyuk, and other guys? Because there was times where people don't want to admit it, but Brandon Aiyuk should have been the guy that Brock Purdy went to. A lot of
Mhm.
times he was open, and for some reason, Brock Purdy passed him up. I don't know why. The regular season, even though the primary target would have been George Kittle, he was
Mhm.
still going through his progression super fast and getting to the next person. So for me, I was very confused on why he just kept trying to force feed Deebo as the primary target. Like to me, that was confusing. So I was wondering if you could explain that for those who have that same thought process.
No, 100%. Like you have progressions. You have your first progression, second progression, third progression. So Purdy, he was missing some throws out there. He was missing some reads. So at the end of the day, he has to get off of Deebo in those situations.
So would you say that's more of a coach's fault or a quarterback's fault in the sense of, Brock has, because to me, I think it's both 50-50 in terms
Mm.
of Brock has the opportunity because you're able to see what the defense is doing. You're able to see what they're in. They're in man. They're not disguising it. Like they're telling me we're in a man. Um, Now you know who your number one receiver in terms of beating man. It's a mismatch. Anytime Brandon Aiyuk is manned up, it's a mismatch. So for me, I was confused on why not attack whoever's on Brandon Aiyuk, whether that was Sneed. I personally thought Sneed was getting work at times.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm curious in terms of, do you think that's mainly Brock's fault or is that mainly Kyle's fault?
Like you said, it's definitely 50-50. But when you got a receiver like Brandon Aiyuk, man, you gotta know where he is, first of all, and then you have to get him the ball. I don't know how many targets he had, but to have 3 receptions and he's not getting locked up. He's open. He was open the majority of the game. When he has 3 receptions, you got to look in the mirror. Kyle, you got to look in the mirror because if he has 3 receptions, why aren't you creating something for him to get more receptions? And then on Brock Purdy's end, you gotta know where your number one receiver is. If Deebo's not getting open, it's progressions, right? You got first progression, second progression, third progression. You got to know where Brandon Aiyuk is, and then it's kind of on Aiyuk as well. He has to go back to the sideline, let Kyle and with
Brock.
Brock Purdy know, like, hey, I'm open right here. Here's what they're trying to do to me. Here's what I'm doing. This is how I'm getting open. Let's work. Let's do something. So it's really on all 3 of them. So they all get a piece of the blame. Honestly,
And that's definitely interesting putting some of it on Brandon Aiyuk because it's true. As a player and you want the ball, go ask for it. We've seen
yeah.
Deebo do it in big games against the Cowboys. Hey, give me the ball here. Literally told Kyle Shanahan, called his shot last playoffs, said, I want the ball, got the ball and scored. Like Kyle will give you the ball if you're asking for it. So for everyone looking at things, for me, I definitely thought it was interesting because right after that Super Bowl loss, a few days later, Kyle's asked if he plans on keeping Steve Wilks. He said, I don't know yet. Following day, it's announced Steve Wilks is fired. What was your reaction to Steve Wilks being fired? Because a lot of people have said he was a scapegoat
Mm.
for Kyle Shanahan's loss in the Super Bowl. A lot of people are saying that he should have been fired a long time ago. What's your initial reaction to the firing?
So look, like Wilkes, he did good. Like we're like I see online where people were saying like the defense doesn't look the same. They didn't look the same, but it's not the same dominant defense. I know they have a lot of talent on that side, but it's not the same dominant defense of the past, right? But he still statistically he still did good, right? He still had his team playing regardless of the situation with him and Kyle. We know that wasn't a good fit from the jump. We know once Kyle started throwing him under the bus during that losing streak, Minnesota and things like that, like we know it wasn't a good fit. So my thoughts, like, yeah, let him go, right? Let him go. The thing with me is, you know, when I'm seeing stuff saying that he wasn't a good coach, he wasn't coaching his defense well, because they really didn't fall off that big, if at all, statistically. So for what he had to work with, Kyle in his ear, Kyle throwing him under the bus, he did all right. He did well. He did better than what you would expect somebody to deal with adversity. But at the same time, it wasn't a good fit. Like we know that we knew that from the jump. Well, people knew that from the jump. I've seen a lot of people talking about it. Like this isn't him, right? He's a blitzer, blitz. Like let's blitz. But Kyle is more so, let's, keep everything in front of us. Let's play this coverage. Let's have the front four go after the quarterback, and that's how we're gonna play. So it wasn't a good fit. So I don't mind the firing. I just don't like how people are trying to twist it as, and I don't even know if I'm seeing he was a scapegoat for the Super Bowl, because they played well enough until the end. But I don't like when people are saying like he just didn't have the defense playing right or playing well during the season. So that's
I
my
mean,
point.
when your defense is only giving up 17 points a game, and you give up 19 points to the greatest quarterback possibly of all time in the Super Bowl, you can't really say it's fully on him, right? Like
Right.
at the end of the day, Kyle hired him knowing he was going to run a different style of defense.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had somebody hire me or tell me to do something that I'm not capable of doing and expecting me right away to do it my best. Like
Right.
that's in anything in life. Like if you're doing it for your first time, you have your, for example, when you're teaching your son how to ride a bike, for those who teach their kids how to ride bikes and stuff, you're not going to expect your son to learn how to ride the bike the moment he gets on the bike. It's not what happens,
100%.
right? Like, so it's for Kyle. It's for me. I thought it was interesting the fact that he's like, you know what, you're learning my defense. Fred called him out immediately, like he doesn't know the system. I'm
Mm-hmm.
teaching it to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wait, your defensive stars are calling out the coach. Now
It's
that
not
tells
good.
me what that told me was Kyle Shanahan don't trust him.
Mm-hmm.
If your best players on defense are calling him out, that means your head coach don't trust you. That's where I was like, all right. During everything, from the beginning, I thought at the bye week they should have let him go. Obviously, defense looked uncomfortable. Their best players weren't really playing to their best potential. I thought it should have been an internal candidate from the beginning. Who do you think at this point in the season, off season, everyone's already been hired, their staffs are already being formed? Who do you hire? Realistically, who do you hire? If it's not from the college rank, who do you hire to become your DC?
Man, so I mean, just off of this experience, this past year, you have to hire from internally, or somebody from the Sala tree or the D'Amico tree. It has to be something like that, because what's ended up happening is we might have this same situation. Maybe the defense takes a step back. Maybe they the defense and Kyle doesn't, they don't mesh. So I would like to see Vrabel or somebody like that, but he might be too alpha for Kyle, right? He might Kyle might try to call a timeout, and Vrabel's like, hey, no, listen here, this is the defense that I'm running. This is how we doing it, right? I'm the D coordinator. You're the offensive coordinator / head coach. Let me run my defense. So I would like to see Vrabel, but he might be too macho for Kyle. But I don't really see anybody else externally that will come in and fit well. Of course, you have your Bill Belichick's that everybody, it seems like a hot topic. Of course, he can come in and keep this defense going. He's a legend, right? I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind that hire. I don't necessarily know the fit or whatnot, but I wouldn't mind that hire at all. But then you got internally, and that's where I think that that's where I think it should come from, is internally. Him, Kyle, and the new D coordinator would mesh well. They know what to expect from each other. They've been around each other for years. So that's where I think it should come from, internally, where it's the DB coach, I want to say, the D line coach.
So you're talking Bullocks, Chris
Bullocks.
Kasarek.
Yeah. But I don't even know. Does Chris even want a defensive coordinator job? I don't know.
In the past, he said he doesn't. In the past, Chris Kasarek has said he does not want to be a defensive coordinator and prefers to be on the D line. Like that's his main role that he likes. So I kind of find it interesting if he was to become DC. Like, how does the D line coach mesh the back end with the front end? Like, how much does he understand the back end? So for me, that one's interesting because I have seen people throw that one around. Actually, the Niners almost hired Vrabel as their defensive coordinator in 2017 when Kyle was hired as head coach. They interviewed him. He just became the Houston Texans defensive coordinator. They promoted him right away. They didn't let that happen. So could be a chance that Kyle does go Vrabel. Now, I was talking to some Tennessee Titans fans, and they said we don't want Vrabel. They said he's not a defensive coach in terms of what they've seen. But what I've seen from Vrabel is when he has a really good team, a really good defense, he's able to slow down Patrick Mahomes. He's one of the only teams that I've seen in the playoffs or regular season slow down Mahomes like pretty damn good. So He has a recipe. He understands what we would need to do. For me, I think they should hire Daniel Bullocks. It doesn't
Mhm.
make sense to go from without. If they do go externally, a few guys that I like, Al Harris,
Mhm.
defensive back coach over there in Dallas,
Mhm.
uh, played in the league, energetic. All his defensive players love him. He kind of knows the system because it's the same system Dan Quinn ran um, in Atlanta. You go farther out. You could go Georgia's defensive coordinator, a young 31-year-old Glenn Schumann.
Mhm.
That name was thrown to me by my guy Rohan.
Mhm.
I could see him coming in, adding some extra juice to that. But to be honest, I'm not too fond on this decision,
Yeah.
because either way, you're kind of back to square one where you were last year. A defensive
Mhm.
coordinator who, whether it's the Bullocks, never called defensive plays, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you're in a situation where if this guy doesn't succeed year one, you continue to fire a defensive coordinator to get the hot candidate in the next phase.
Mhm.
Like, how much leeway do you think a defensive coordinator has coming into this team right now?
It doesn't seem like a lot, right? We just saw it. We just saw it firsthand that like we saw mid-season. It looked like after the Minnesota game he was going to be fired on the
It
spot.
did.
It looked like it. So I don't think they have much leeway, and Kyle has to get it right. These are his decisions, right? He's making these decisions. He's talking with these coaches in the interview. Like he knows what these coaches want to run. He knows what he's telling these coaches that he wants to run. Like so, it's his decision. Like he has to get it right. There's no reason why they should have been. They should be playing in the Super Bowl, and then letting a coach go, firing a coach. It's no reason. It doesn't make sense. But he should have did it earlier in the season because we knew it was going to happen.
Is Kyle Shanahan too controlling for any external candidates? After if you're a defense coordinator right now, right?
Mhm.
Kyle Shanahan calls you, say, "I want you to be my D coordinator,
Mhm.
but you got to do this, and this, right?" Like he did that with
Mhm.
Wilkes.
Yeah.
Is he too controlling?
Yeah, he might be for a seasoned vet. He might be a little too controlling. Like, and that's why I don't see Bill Belichick coming in. I don't see Variable coming in. I see like a younger D coordinator where he might be able to get in their ear and not have them bark back. You know what I'm saying? So I think he might be too controlling. Honestly, he just needs to let the defense hire a D coordinator, let them run the defense. You're making this decision because you think that they can take your defense to the next level, right? Better than what they were last year. So hire a D coordinator and let them run the defense. Trust them.
And what's interesting is he did that with Robert Saleh,
Mhm.
did that with D'Amico Ryans,
Mhm.
didn't do it with Steve Wilkes. He showed a
Yeah.
different kind of like mentality when it came to Wilkes. Like he didn't trust him at all. So
From the jump.
for for Robert Saleh, a lot of people wanted him fired right away. Year one, year two, like every year he was with us, people were like firing him at one point. He stuck with them and said, "You know what? You guys don't understand how good of a defensive coordinator this is. A hell of a coach." It gave him
Mhm.
confidence. Same thing with D'Amico Ryans. As soon as he was hired, he said, "This is going to be one of the best hires I've ever made."
Mhm.
Steve Wilkes, complete opposite. So to me, I'm like, yo, if you're going to hire someone, let them do their thing. If
Yeah.
it's a coach who is a very heavy blitzer, for example, Steve Spagnuolo and Kyle Shanahan would never go together. Like
Nope.
Spagnuolo does whatever the hell he wants, and he's blitzing constantly. Like
Mhm.
that's his mo. Kyle wants. I don't get why he doesn't want you to blitz. Like I get if you don't get home, the big play could happen,
Mhm.
but that's why you pay the investment along the defensive line, your linebackers, and it's heavy.
Yeah.
Like that to me is so. I do think Kyle Shanahan is too controlling over his defensive coordinators now.
Mhm.
He showed it with Steve Wilkes, and until you show me otherwise, you're a little too controlling.
Yeah.
Now, big talk, right? As soon as the Niners lost,
Ah,
Brandon Aiyuk's family is on Twitter, on Instagram saying that's why we're headed to Vegas. Don't forget what got you here, is what Brandon Aiyuk tweeted out. Um, a lot of stuff's going on, like a lot of
mhm.
rumors, a lot of things. People high up reporting that the Niners might trade him. Now there is some cap purposes on why they could trade him. Obviously, he would probably net a mid first rounder to a high first round pick. He's a true receiver one. Now, I know your answer. Likely as a receiver, I know Brandon Aiyuk is one of your favorites, but I'm gonna give you some numbers with it, just because the numbers do play a big factor into what's going on with Brandon Aiyuk. So if the Niners do trade him, they could actually save $14 million in cap space. But if they extend him, they could save 10.3. And then at the end of the day, people what they are forgetting about is the Niners will need about, I want to say it's about $10 million in cap space to sign their rookie class. If they keep all 11 picks, it's like around 10.8 to 11.5, depending on if they get an extra comp pick. So there's cap purposes to trade him, but there's also reasons to keep him. Should and will the 49ers trade Brandon Aiyuk?
No. And here's why, right? He's a top receiver. He does not get all the targets. He doesn't. The wealth is spread. He's always open. A lot of the times, more times than not, he's open. The Niners have not had that elite receiver in a long time. So if you're not gonna pay Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, who are you gonna pay, right? Are you just gonna, every time you bring somebody in, you're gonna get them, hopefully they do well, hopefully they turn into a top receiver, and then keep trading them off? He's not that type of dude. He's a great locker room. You don't never hear nothing bad about him. The teammates love him. He blocks. He's a hard worker. He could catch. He can get open. If you go backside, it's one-on-one. They blitz and get open real quick. He can do that. He's good with the ball after the catch. Like, what more do you want? What is it going to take for you to pay somebody like that? You got to pay him.
I agree with you, but we also got to look at the player perspective too, right? Like, not getting the targets, barely hit 105 targets this year. Most players are, as an elite receiver, most players are hitting 150, 160. As a player, he might want the ball more. And do you think the Niners could afford to give him the ball more? Can their offense function with Brandon Aiyuk receiving 8 to 10 targets a game, which would be 8 is around, obviously 10 targets is a ridiculous amount. That's at 170. But if you're at 8 targets averaged over the 17 game stretch, that's 136 targets. Can the Niners give him 30 more targets, and will their offense stay as productive? That's the biggest question for me, is will it stay productive having a true receiver one? Because if you go back to Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta, when he had Julio Jones, who probably one of the best receivers ever play, he didn't get that many targets either. I went back to look at it. I'm going to go back. That year they went to the Super Bowl, 2017. The year he won the Super Bowl. Actually, let's pull it up right now. Just because for me, when I looked at it, I was like, there's no way in 2017, the year they went to the Super Bowl, he only had, in 2016, sorry, they went to the Super Bowl. It was 2017, the year. He had 129 targets.
And he's arguably he is one of the best players, one of the best receivers to play.
So is that a Kyle thing? Is that his system that doesn't allow it?
Yeah, because Matt Ryan he was throwing the ball across the yard back in the day, right? He was throwing the ball. So I think it's a system thing. But at the end of the day, you gotta know how to keep your players satisfied. I mean, and on Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, the point is to get paid, right? So once you get paid, I feel like you should fall in line, and team success at that time. It's team success. Like, come on, I might get 6 targets this game. I might get 11 targets this game. I might get 3 targets this game. It's easier said than done, but I don't know. It's up, like, once you get paid, what do you want? Team success or the individual success? Great receivers are always going to want the ball, right? You always going to want the ball, and that's a good trait to have. But can you accept, not getting as many as, the Justin Jeffersons and, the Jamar Chases and Devontae Adams? Are you going to be cool with that? I mean, you're still putting up the stats. You still having a really good season, but are you okay with not getting those crazy targets? That's something Brandon Aiyuk is going to have to answer. He's going to get paid regardless. He's going to get paid regardless. Yeah. So now he got to ask himself, do you want team success, less targets, or crazy targets and you probably gonna one day probably stay healthy could become an all-pro receiver. So
The thing is though is he would be a hot commodity right away, right?
easy.
The Houston Texans
Oh yeah.
immediately give CJ Stroud a true number one receiver to go with Tank Dell. Now Tank Dell possibly could be a receiver one
Mm-hmm.
if you look at it certain ways, but coming off a big injury
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, giving them Brandon Aiyuk, which they have, believe they have pick 21,
Don't
gets
forget
paid.
don't forget about Nico Collins.
I'm not forgetting about Nico
Yeah.
Collins, but like if you look at it, they would likely choose Nico Collins is up there, but
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Aiyuk might be better. Like it,
Yeah. I would say
so
so.
for them in the long run, it would be better to keep Brandon Aiyuk over a Nico Collins kind of guy where you could trade him away and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
roster construction makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, the team that can pay you and give you targets and have team success is actually Houston.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, I'm looking at that one, and it's someone who is familiar with them. It's D'Amico Ryans who's familiar. So I definitely don't think the Niners should trade him. It doesn't make sense to trade away your best players, especially when if you look at your other targets and your other players who are on the roster in terms of George Kittle, going to be already in his 32-year season. Deebo Samuel, going to be 28. How much longer do they really have at a high level? Brandon Aiyuk's barely going to be, 26, I believe. So it's kind of hard to trade away guys like that. It doesn't make sense financially because you save $10 million in cap space extending him. It doesn't make when people are like, oh, you can't extend him. It doesn't make sense financially. No, this next year it actually makes more sense to keep him. You extend him, you save $10 million, and then a lot of things come. Now, a question that I see floating around. It kind of ties in with the next segment we're going to. So I'm going to put the next question on the board as well. But would you, if you had to choose one or the other, Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk, who do you keep?
So, I mean, I love both players for what they add, and I'm seeing a lot of things about Deebo online, which don't forget, like if he does, he helped this team go on that run and get hot. That during that Philly game, I think it started during the Philly game. He helped this team get hot, right? And he's just a different type of player. But longevity, Brandon Aiyuk will last longer in the NFL than Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel takes a lot of hits. He's a hybrid. He's a running back that can go out for a pass and catch the ball and still do something with the ball after he catches it. He's a hybrid. So it's going to be a lot more wear and tear on his body. So Brandon Aiyuk is going to last longer. He's a traditional receiver. Get open. He can turn into a possession receiver down the road. So I'm saying for sure 100% keep Brandon Aiyuk. 100%.
Now, I agree there. Now, there's some people who are saying, you know what? It might be if the Niners have to trade someone right now, it should be Deebo. The numbers that are out there don't make sense for trading Deebo. So if he's traded, now I've seen people saying cut players. One, the Niners aren't going to, I'm going to put this out there because I think it's very stupid of people to be saying cut them, right? It only makes sense to cut certain players. And what I mean by that is if they're already aging and you save money before the June 1st deadline, then it makes sense. But for me, I'm looking at things, and the 49ers are a team where if you trade Deebo Samuel before June 1st, makes zero fucking sense. You eat $22 million in dead cap, and you only save 6.8. They're not going to pay another team to have Deebo on their roster.
Yeah,
they're not doing. They're not paying Deebo to play for someone else. You want to trade him if you're going to trade him before June 1st. You want to do it before the draft. You want something in return,
right?
That's out the picture, right?
Yeah.
But if the 49ers decide, you know what, let's draft a receiver in the second round, or it's a really deep class, first round, you could then think about, you know what, we could trade Deebo Samuel after June 1st, which would then save you $22 million. It flips. They save $22 million, but their dead cap this year would be 6.6, and next year it would be 15. His out in his contract is not until next year.
Okay.
So for me, it
Okay.
doesn't make sense on why people were throwing his name out there.
Yeah.
They shouldn't trade him because one, his contract numbers does not make sense to trade.
Mhm.
You need to get something in return for this player immediately.
Mhm.
Does not make sense, right? So after hearing the numbers, would you trade Deebo Samuel, or will the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel?
No, not at all. They run it back. They have this core who's only getting older, and Trent, George, and to name two of them. They have the core that's getting older, and they just made the Super Bowl. They were winning the whole Super Bowl. You got to run it back with the main core. Now there may be some outliers that you should cut and get some cap room and start over at that position. But Deebo's numbers, like you just said, it makes no sense. Like he's not a bad player. He's not a bad player. He doesn't suck. He's actually a good player, regardless of how people feel about him after the Super Bowl. And I want to say he was playing hurt or late. It was either hurt or lazy, one of them. I think he was hurt. But you got to run it back with him. It's no point. We're not cutting him. That's out the door. Doesn't make sense. I don't know why people are saying that. And then the cap number, give him another year. Run it back with this team. It's not like we're hurting ourselves if we run it back with that Deebo Aiyuk combination. So you got till next year, and next year, if it's not what you think it is, put him out there for trade.
What people don't realize, and it's crazy, is the 49ers are more likely to restructure his contract than anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, if they restructure him, they save $15 million in cap space.
Yeah,
that's a lot of money. Yeah. Now you do push numbers down the road, where he is already 28. You just turned 28. I want to say like last month or 2 months. So you do push numbers down the road. If you extend him, it's around $60 million. So extending him and restructuring him is the same thing, but you're pushing money down the road. You're pushing your numbers where the cap numbers will go up later, but you're going to be in the same situation in about 2 years where it's like, hey, how do we get out of his contract? Right. Yeah. This is a good point. Deebo needs to focus his offseason on running routes. McDuffie was on him like a blanket. At this stage in his career, how much better can he get at running routes?
Man, it's tough. He's going to need to figure that out though, because the way he plays and he's pushing 30, he's not gonna be at the highest level for too long playing like that. There's too much tread, wear and tear on his body. So he's gonna have to turn into a receiver who can get open, intermediate. I see him more so intermediate, get open. I don't know. Sometimes players just have that in them, and they've had it in them for a long time, right? Sometimes players just don't have routes. I mean, and they still make it work, and he's made it work up to this point. But I agree with Lowe. Like he needs to figure out how, like, what's his niche? Like how is he going to start getting open? Like what route? What do you need to work on? He has to sit down and look at the film and come up with what he needs to work on as a route runner.
What's interesting is at the Senior Bowl, when Kyle Shanahan fell in love with him, he was actually running really damn good routes. He was beating mans off the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. Like his release package was phenomenal at the Senior Bowl. Like that's why Kyle fell in love with him. Like there was points where, because that Senior Bowl was the one where I focus on even more because the Niners are they're going to be taking hell of Senior Bowl players, and he was whooping dudes off the line of scrimmage left and right. No one could guard him. No one. Now few years later, he's like a running back now. Like he's a running back out there running. I truly believe, and it's not a hot take, Christian McCaffrey is a much better route runner if you were to line him up out wide.
Yeah,
much better. Yeah. So to me, when your running back's a better route runner than you as a receiver, there's issues. Yeah. Now, we're gonna go another player before we continue moving on. George Kittle's numbers. He's at that point where you only get 2 targets in a Super Bowl, right? His contract numbers are pretty big. He has a 21.9 cap hit this year. The way his contract was structured this is his out year in terms of money financially. So essentially, the 49ers it's an out year, but it's actually a shitty out year. The way they restructure some of these contracts.
Yeah.
I know Parag Marathe gets tons of credit for being this cap guru, cap genius, his contracts with big name players are shitty as fuck.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. And if you're a kid watching, excuse my language, but they're shitty. The back end, you cannot have contracts where the back end of the deal is there's literally this is your out year, but there's no out. So I'm gonna read these numbers to you.
No.
George Kittle's numbers right now, if he was to be released, which again, a player like of his caliber won't be released, 18.3 million dead cap this year. If he's traded before June 1st, which the Niners would prefer because they get draft capital, they eat 18.3 and only save 3.9 or 3.5. They're not doing that. Now, if he's released or traded after the June 1st deadline, so if they were to sign a tight end in free agency or draft a tight end that they feel comfortable with, then they could potentially do this. You trade them, you eat 7.9 this year, 10 next year, and you save 13.9 this year. So there's a possibility of them doing it. Again, to me, numbers don't make sense. I don't get why people are throwing Deebo and George Kittle out there, but I wanted to talk about it to bring these numbers up. Should the Niners start using George Kittle more as a receiver than as a blocker? How do you take advantage of this kind of money? And if you're not going to take advantage of this high-paid tight end who you paid him to be this legit receiver, if he's not this elite receiver that you're using him as, which in my opinion, I think he's still that guy. He hit 1,000 yards this year. If you're not going to use him that way, I think you should trade him. And this is the player where I'm more on the lines of you should probably think about it post June 1st if you don't plan on using him as a key part in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, as a true receiver instead of using him as a blocking tight end.
So, I mean, then that's where Kyle comes into play. It's no reason why Aiyuk and Kittle shouldn't be in the top half of the league in targets. They're your most dynamic receivers, and they're also dynamic after the catch. So I don't think we should do anything with Kittle yet. But if his usage is still not up there, next year we're gonna have to have a conversation. He's good. We're not having a conversation because he's declining and he's not good. We're having that conversation because we're having cap issues, right? But we're not using those players like how their cap number is. Like Kittle, I know Kittle's a big blocker. Like he's great. He's a great blocker, but you're paying him because he's a great receiver too. So those target share numbers have to go up. Kyle has to figure out a way. You know, he has his quarterback. You got Aiyuk and Kittle. Like their target numbers have to go up. There's nothing about it. He has to make it happen.
What's crazy is in 2018, George Kittle had 136 targets. That's when he had 1,300 yards, and he put the league on notice. This past year, only 90 targets, 65 receptions. If you go and you look at, let's say, what tight end in the league is Sam Laporta. The reason why I'm gonna go Sam Laporta is because they have a ton of mouths to feed, right? Like they have a shit ton of mouths to feed. Looking at them, they have a lot of receivers. He had 120 targets.
And see, you say 120 targets, but they also run the ball. They have two running backs. They also run the ball. Kittle has to get targets.
And that's not even factoring in Amon-Ra St. Brown's targets, which is probably ridiculous amount. He's probably at 165, if not more. He was at 164. I knew that number. So for me, it's like we can't really. The reason why I compare them to the Lions in terms of targets is they have hella mouths to feed. Yeah. We have mouths to feed, but their best players are getting the targets. Yeah. They're not using. You got to treat Deebo as receiver 3 now. You have to. He's at that point where he's not creating separation. So I don't think the Niners should trade George Kittle. Now, if you're not going to use him as an elite receiving tight end, get rid of him. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like you could go get a guy like Hunter Henry where you want him to be a blocking tight end. You want him to be a blocker and use him situationally, do so. Yeah. But to me, where I'm frustrated with it is the way they're using these players. You're paying them at a high price, right? But in the Super Bowl, disappeared. 2 receptions, 2 yards. That's ridiculous, especially when they're blitzing and playing man all game. That's to me no excuse for that. So for me, it's one of those ones where I don't think they should trade him. I don't think they will trade him. But if you're gonna not plan on using him as an elite receiver, let's have the conversation. And that's where I'm stuck right now. It's one of those ones where the Niners can't be sentimental with some of these players, right?
Yeah.
You're either going to be, you got to run your organization how you got to run it. For example, I tweeted out about Kyle Juszczyk. So Kyle Juszczyk he's already up there. He's going to be 33. If they actually cut him, which this is a player I think you can cut. The reason why you can cut him is no teams use fullbacks anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So like this is a player no one's gonna really, hey, I want to trade for him. But if you cut him before June 1st, you save 4.9 million. If you do it post June 1st, it's 6.25. So he's still gonna sign somewhere, likely, but you're safe. That's a good amount of money when it comes to a fullback. That's a potentially a starting right guard. Or you could use that money plus the money you get from extending players or restructuring contracts to get yourself a starting right tackle. So those are the players where I think we should look at, not necessarily the top name guys. It's the guys where a lot of fans love Juice. They love him, right? But the sentimental value has to go out the door if you want to build a Super Bowl winner. And I get it, Niner faithful. You guys want to keep your best favorite players. It's not going to happen that way. It won't. Now, should the 49ers, this is a question I think should be more talked about than anything. It's, for me, it's if you trade players now to retool, you could retool and get better for the years to come. If you don't think about anything, you don't think about cutting anyone, for example, if you don't think Juice or some other players on the team are worth trading or worth cutting because you love them so much, in a few years, the Niners are going to be where the Rams were last year and the year before in terms of completely gutting everything out after they won the Super Bowl and starting over and rebuilding and having to do it through the draft. Should the Niners retool now, or should they rebuild in the future and try to go all in and get a Super Bowl? And if they don't, they screw themselves because you wasted a lot of resources but don't have a Super Bowl to show for it.
I think in the situation that they're in, they need a Super Bowl. They need a Super Bowl. They'll take a Super Bowl over a few down years, a little more than a few down years in the future when they, when they have to gut everything. I think they're too close, and this organization is about Super Bowls. It's not about, how many times we can get to the playoffs, how many times, it's about Super Bowls, and it's been like that for years, right? So I think they have to figure out how to keep this core together. Not throwing the towel just yet. I think next year we can really have that discussion depending on what happens. Man, and I think we will. If something happens next year where, God forbid, like if they miss the playoffs or if they're a first round out or something like that, this team will get gutted. So now it's not the time. It's not the time. They're too close. They had a young quarterback who they feel really good about, who's coming back for year 3, really year 2. And the time is now, right? They went this route because of the quarterback situation. They don't have to pay the quarterback yet. So this was their strategy. So now they have the guy that they want, and they're not paying him yet. He's going to get paid down the road. So it's time now. They got to win. They can't gut it just yet.
And I think you mentioned something perfect. The quarterback situation and his money situation, right?
Yeah.
He's on his third year, which after next year, guaranteed he's asking for an extension.
Yeah.
Like guaranteed, right? So for me, it's looking at that. He's not going to play on his fourth year of a rookie deal as a Mr. Irrelevant and get hurt potentially or anything like that. He's going to get paid after next year. This is the opportunity to go all in with the guys that you're paying, the guys that people are wanting to trade, guys like George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk. You don't trade those guys. You need those guys to fucking win it. Yeah. Like I'm at the point where it's like I'm tired of seeing certain names being thrown in there. It was like, no, you need those guys to win it.
Yeah.
Let's look at the coaching staff and look at the coaching from Kyle and say, you know what, Kyle? Why the fuck aren't you using George Kittle? Why is George Kittle being used as a right tackle?
Pretty much.
Like to me, that's how I'm looking at things right now. Don't retool now. Shit, if you use your first round pick, if you go out and you sign a right tackle that you like, cool. Use that first round pick and whatever you need. If you think you're a cornerback away, go fucking get him.
Yeah.
Like, truly, that's where I'm at right now. Because if you don't have a Super Bowl to show for it, the last 5 years, 3-4 years, for nothing.
Yeah.
That's
And
how
they're
I
only
see it.
getting older. They're only getting older.
That's how I see it. It's a similar situation to the team of the Harbaugh days. Great teams don't have enough. You end up going all in every year. They had nothing to show for it.
Mhm.
Great team, though. Unfortunately, it sucks. It truly does. But I'm at the point where I think they should go all in and fuck it, rebuild in the future. If you have a quarterback and Kyle Shanahan, you're really not going to need to truly rebuild. For example, Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay.
Yeah.
People thought they were going to be terrible, right? When you have a quarterback and you have a head coach who's really good, you're not bad for long. So
hit on a
I
few
would rather
draft picks.
hit on a few draft picks this year. Go get a right tackle. Go get up the offensive line. That's where you struggled. They've been struggling there for a few years now. Get that position solidified. But I don't think they should trade players and retool now. To me, it doesn't make sense.
Not yet.
Now, there's a lot of free agents, right? The Niners have a ton of them. Some big names, guys like Chase Young, Javon Kinlaw, who a reason why the Niners should not trade Brandon Aiyuk is because if they trade Brandon Aiyuk, they're likely going to take a receiver. And look how that went when they did DeForest Buckner for Javon Kinlaw.
Not good.
DeForest Buckner will still probably be tearing it up next to Nick Bosa right now. But hey, Javon Hargrave, right? I'm just saying, bro. Like, I'm just saying, like, hey, we got Javon Hargrave. That's cool.
Yeah, I forgot.
Playing with a torn thumb and playing against the backup offensive guard who tore his UCL, and that's great.
Still can't get in there.
So going back to those names, so we got guys like Chase Young, Javon Kinlaw, Sam Darnold, Randy Gregory. You got guys like Clelin Ferrell, who just had knee surgery, Ray McLeod, Jawan Jennings, no one needs to worry about. He's a restricted free agent. They'll probably give the first right to refusal. So what if he doesn't get a big contract? They'll bring him back. So not really many big names, but there's some guys out there. John Feliciano, who started at guard for us majority of the year. Is there anyone on this list in terms of free agents that the 49ers should bring back?
What number? Man, I don't know. It's tough. I was gonna say, what number can you bring Chase Young back at? But
so according to Spot Rack, which they're usually fairly accurate in terms of the market value, sometimes it'll fluctuate up and down. They're saying that he's roughly at $13 million in terms of his value. So each is per year. So I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, would you do it at $13 million?
I don't know, man. It'd have to be a number that I really love to bring Chase Young back. Hey, look. So we talk about Chris Kocurek as this great defensive line coach, right? And he is, right? So why not? This Chase Young is a great talent. What is he lacking in? Effort, consistency. That's coaching right there. You gotta be able to get him. You gotta be able to light a fire under him and get him going because he has the talent. The talent is undeniable. So I would not like to just. I mean, as bad as not even bad as not up to par that he played since we traded for him. He just really didn't show up. I can't do the 13 million number, but you just can't refuse his talent. And if Chris Kocurek can get him to play hard and get him to be consistent with a whole offseason, I would like to bring him back, but I can understand why they won't. He just didn't show up this year.
There's a good reason to not bring him back, right? That effort, yes. But you also got to put into the fact. I thought he played phenomenal in the Super Bowl.
Yes,
I thought he played phenomenal. Like when you think of why you traded for him, that's why you traded for him. But it also took George Kittle going up to him and telling him, "Hey, we need you all game, every play. Don't take a snap off. Go until the whistle blows. Hey, George.
Yeah.
Fumble. Hey, George. Maybe you should play to the whistle too. I mean, I'm on one today. I'm feisty today, but,
I love it.
But it's like, to me, so it's interesting, right? George Kittle motivates him, tells him play to the whistle. plays phenomenal. George Kittle don't play to the whistle, fumble right in front of him. Don't know if him playing to the whistle and blocking prevents George Karlaftis from recovering the fumble. But if George Kittle blocks him to the outside, pancakes him like he normally does, normally he's trying to pancake you.
Yeah.
Karlaftis never recovers that fumble. That's where I was like, you know what? You got to play to the whistle. But looking at Chase Young, PFF had a interesting numbers out there. They said Chase is their choice for the 49ers in terms of one pending free agent that the Niners can't lose. And they said it's not only because of the 49ers sending a top 100 pick to the Commanders for him at the deadline, but it's also because of the enticing upside following a full season working with D-line coach Chris Kasarik. Chase's 15.2 pass rush win percentage rate in 2023 was a top 30 mark. He set a career high with 66 pressures and 7.5 sacks. So his win rate of 15.2 is in the top 30. So that means he is probably the best player on a few defensive lines in the NFL. You can't get rid of players like that.
I don't think you can.
If anything, we should be thinking, what's Javon Hargrave's numbers to cut him, trade him, get rid of him?
That's just out.
Like, to be honest, that's to me where they possibly can get rid of Hargrave. People don't want to talk about it, but post June 1st, you could trade him. I don't really care what they get for him. Post June 1st, you trade him. You don't need picks for him. Draft a few defensive tackles. Bring back Javon Kinlaw at a cheap rate.
Yeah, he's not going for a lot.
So Javon Hargrave, you're looking at you trade him post June 1st, you eat 5.8 and you eat 9.5. And that's over a few. You're probably going to have some that you eat next year too because his contract is terrible. It's a really bad contract. Said it from the beginning. So that's what they should do, in my opinion. If you're going to keep Chase Young, try to figure out how to get off of Hargrave's contract.
Yeah.
Would you want to bring back Sam Darnold?
No point.
No point. You don't think the greatest quarter thrower of the football of the 49ers history is worth to bring him back?
No, if he doesn't bring him back, and he said those comments, it was I don't know what he's not coming back. I don't think he's coming back. What is his market? I don't even think it's marketed. I don't even think he has a market.
So Spot Rack didn't even give him a market tab. So they'll give you a market value, like a button where you click on. Market value for Javon Kinlaw is $5.4 million. Sam Darnold don't even have that on him. So don't know what his market value is. But another few guys I'm going to ask you about, Randy Gregory, 31 years old, Niners traded a 7th rounder for him to bring in as a speed rusher, pass rusher kind of guy. Didn't really pan out. That's why they traded for Chase Young. He had a good game in the Super Bowl. Would you bring him back as a kind of more of that guy to be on the summer? Like, hey, can you beat someone out?
Yeah. And I was kind of high on him. I thought he could be that speed rusher type. I didn't see it at all on film. You bring him. No, I don't even think you bring him back. You can bring him back depending on if he gets signed or not. If he doesn't get signed and he's just out there floating, you bring him back for camp. Get him, continue to familiarize himself with the defense and learning the plays. You'll probably let him go at the cut deadline. And then he'll be ready if just in case injury comes up, somebody gets hurt and you need to bring him back. So I think you just move on from Gregory.
I would agree. I think you move on from Gregory as well. I mean, there's not much to bring him back unless you're going to have him as a camp body. Khalil Farrell's the one who I think they should think about bringing him back. I mean, he had a solid season this year as terms of being a run defender. Doesn't give you much as a pass rusher, and I thought that from the beginning, like, hey, he could be a good run defender. Not going to provide much. I think he should be a candidate. What is your range in price range in terms of Jawan Jennings? What's too much for Jawan Jennings, and should they match any team's offer?
Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. Just because we already have two high paid receivers, 3 if you count Kittle, because we have 3. Jennings is a player who I would love to bring back. I would have to see all the numbers and like what's too much for a receiver, really a receiver four. What's too much for a receiver four? What's too much for a receiver three? I would bring him back at a receiver three number. Even though he is like our receiver four, I would bring him back at a receiver three. I was gonna say low end too, but I don't know. That might just be too much, and we have other needs elsewhere. I think we can draft a receiver who can fill in and be that Jennings type of player. But I would love to bring him back. Dude is a baller. He's just not flashy, but he's a baller, man, and he's consistently good when you need him to be.
So Kendrick Bourne, when he was with the Niners, he was their receiver 3, receiver 2 at times. At 1 year, receiver 1.
Mhm.
Shit, he did everything for us.
Yeah.
He ended up signing a 3-year, $14.6 million contract, I believe, or was it? Let me go to contract details. I'm on the wrong one. He ended up signing a 3-year, $15 million contract with the New England Patriots. He's set to be a free agent this offseason. His market value, actually, they have his market value at 4.8. Which he's a solid receiver 3 in the Niners system. If that's the number for a guy like Kendrick Bourne, I would assume
I would bring him back.
Jennings would be around that range.
I
think Jennings is better too in terms
Yeah.
of blocker and everything like that. I agree. I would bring him back if he's around that number. I personally think 8 is the max they could go, because you could make it where you restructure everything, and it's not really eating up at your cap space.
Yeah.
Do you bring back John Feliciano, who caught out his teammate right after the Super Bowl?
That's tough.
He played well.
He played well. I think he's a great swing guard center who can, fill in when need be. I think the Niners should bring him back for that. But they have to shore up that right guard, right tackle position. But I do think Feliciano could in a pinch, he can play really well for the Niners if need be. So yes, I would bring back John Feliciano.
I don't bring him back.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't is because in my opinion, I get you're trying to defend Colton McKivitz. I get that. You're a starter on the team, but you don't call out other players. You don't publicly do it. I get you're just trying to defend him. But to me, at that point, it's like, okay, well, now Spencer Burford ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
Does it become a locker room issue? Does it come something like that? I doubt it would, because they're grown-ups, they're adults, they're not kids, and he apologized to him and everything like that. But it's also like I wouldn't bring him back. If you do bring him back, he's guaranteed a backup.
Yeah.
Like, you're not bringing him back with, you know what? Hey, like they did this year, you could compete for that starting right guard job or the starting center job. No, you're not competing. You're my backup.
Yeah.
Because you obviously got your ass whooped far too often where that is an issue for us. So for me, I know a lot of people wanted to bring him back. The guy who's guaranteed to come back this year, guaranteed, Ross Dwelly. I kid you not.
For what? Does he even play?
He don't play, but that's Kyle's guy. Every year he comes back.
That means Juice is staying. That means Darnold is staying. That's his dude. Those are his dudes right there.
Which doesn't make I could see the Niners trying to get off of Hargrave and extending Sebastian Joseph, who came in late, really didn't get to play much. That contract is just bad.
Yeah.
Like, that was a contract where they were like, you know what? We're winning the Super Bowl this year. It's a fuck it kind of contract where we'll live with the bad cap space because we just won the Super Bowl, and he was the missing link when he wasn't the missing link. I gotta find. There's an episode where I recorded with who was it? Might have been Rohan and Sunil. And I told him, like, our run defense is gonna be out the door. It's not gonna be good. He wasn't never. If you watch the film, he was never good. To me, that contract was bad. But we have a good question in the chat. We got 49ers throwback. He's asking, who do you think the 49ers next defensive coordinator will be? I'll let you go first on this one. It's kind of hard to predict because the other day I was texting someone. I think it was Rohan. I was like, hey, who do you think? Have no idea. If they're not announcing who's interviewing, you kind of can't really predict. It's kind of just like, hey, you know what? This is who they should.
Yeah.
So I guess is who should they hire? Not necessarily who do you think, but who should they hire?
So I even say who I think who I think is going to be, if it's internal, I have a feeling like if nobody knows who's interviewing, I have a feeling it's internal. So I would go more towards the DB coach. I'm always drawing a blank.
Daniel
Bullocks. But I think it's the Brandon Staley. I think it's Brandon Staley. I think that's who they're gonna hire. I don't think like that's
Oh, geez.
the good choice. I think they need to hire either Corsair or Bullocks, and build from they both were under Salah and D'Amico. I think you go that route, but I have a feeling it's Brandon Staley. I got a feeling.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I got a feeling, man.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
Wow, man. Well, I personally, I think is Daniel Bullocks. I think he's internally, that's the guy you go to. You got to hire Daniel Bullocks to be your guy. I know a lot of people are throwing around Nick Sorensen, who is a defensive passing game specialist, and he has the track record of calling plays, I believe. But I'm not too sure because guys like Johnny Holland, I know he's been there for linebacker coach, been there forever. Hey, you got it. When you're that good of a coach, I know he's battled health conditions and stuff like that, stepped away from the team due to his health. But when you have that good of a coach and he's that on page with the linebacking crew, and the issue was from Kyle is, you know what, the linebacking group wasn't on par. They weren't understanding what's going on. That could be an option, but I truly want to add, I threw it out there to Rohan in a text message because he had asked me the same question, and I texted him back, and I was like, you know what? I would love to see a co-defensive coordinator situation. And the reason why I say co-defensive coordinator is Chris Kasarik never called plays, doesn't want to be a defensive coordinator, but he's great at understanding the front four and the front seven. He's great at that. Daniel Bullocks never called defensive plays. He's more familiar with the back end.
Yeah.
Why not pair those two? Hey, you know what? We're gonna be calling things together. Have Daniel Bullocks call the game. Have Chris Kasarik let him know, hey, front four needs to be this, needs to go. You can't pair that together. Because if that's the issue, give Chris Kasarik and give your D coordinator more leeway. Have them do it. Now, it won't happen. You don't see co-defense coordinators.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, I mean, if you're going to go in-house and you're going to go inexperienced, why not try something that no one else has ever done? Like, I don't see why you would, because Nick Sorensen has been with the Niners. I know a lot of people keep throwing his name out there. He's only been with us for 1 year. I believe he came with us in 2022. No, actually, in 2020, after spending joined the 49ers after spending the 2021 season as a Jacksonville Jaguars coach. So he became, first year was 2022. So this 2 years now. Does he truly understand the defense? I think Daniel Bullocks has been there longer.
Yeah.
Chris Kasarik has been here longer. That's something I would do. Now, it's far-fetched, but I think Daniel Bullocks is the guy, and it doesn't make sense if he's not.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, I saw your sister wrote a book, right? You want to plug that real quick? I saw her book.
Oh, yeah. So if you go on here. Yeah, she wrote a book. It's a kid's book, sports book.
So if you have a kid, you want to donate a book to an elementary school, this is the best way to donate things to elementary schools. You buy books for them, you donate it to their library. As a teacher, that's the best way to donate to schools, I promise you. So get this book for your kid or donate it to an elementary school library.
So it's called Sports Dreams. If you go on Instagram, Kiava Martinez. If you go on Instagram, you'll find her there. You'll be able to find
my sister right there.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Right. You might be related to her husband. Right. You might be. And then you can also find it on Culture Publishing House on Instagram as well.
Okay. So I'll find it. I'll post it on my Twitter. So you guys, if anyone in the chat or watching wants to get it, I'll also put it in the community section on YouTube, so you guys could go and order that book if you have a kid, nephew, niece, you want to donate it to an elementary school. We're always trying to help the youth out. I kind of read a little snippet, not a snippet of it, but kind of what the intro is. So I'm definitely going to order it so I could read it myself and then give it to I have nephews and nieces, so give it to them so they could read.
Nice. There you go.
Where can they find you on Twitter, Josh?
They can find me at J Harp the second. Also in my bio on Twitter, the bottles are up.
It was released.
The website is up. Go check it out. I'm gonna be doing all the marketing stuff tomorrow, maybe tonight. We'll see. But it's up. Go take a look, man. Let me know what y'all think. J Harp,
And that's the shot glasses or the water bottles.
The kid water bottles, shot glasses
Water
are
bottle.
still in the making. So that's the kids water bottles. It's called Hydrate Like a Pro. So go check it out.
Okay, hydrate like a pro.
It's in
So
my
make sure
bio.
you guys. There's two things for you guys to get. You guys got to go get hydrate like a pro water bottle. NJ Harp's bio. I'll add it to the description for this channel as well. I'll add it to the community as well. And then the book. It is the name of the book was something athlete.
Sports Dream.
Sports Dream.
Yeah,
I'm far off.
Written by Kiava Martinez.
So make sure you guys go get those. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys subscribe to both channels. J Harp the Second TV, Clutch Gene Sports. We'll see you guys on tomorrow with Rohan and on Friday with Ashley Ariana. So make sure you guys subscribe so you guys don't miss a channel. We out.
Peace.